day, folks. Welcome back to another episode of Pirkei Avos, live from Israel with Rabbi Chaim Coffman. I so enjoy this class. He keeps bringing us more and more, and it's just such joy to hear about the ethics. Ethics we all can integrate into our lives and things that just bring things alive. More than that, we can nickname Rabbi Coffman Rabbi Checkmate, Chaim Checkmate Coffman. I mean, I just still can't get over the fact of how easily he's put to silence some of these trolls. So I'm not going to beleaguer this anymore. We're just going to turn it over to Rabbi Coffman. I think we're moving on today to chapter 1, Mishnah 15. Rabbi, how you doing? How's everything in Israel, sir?
Everything is doing good. Everything's doing great. Weather was good, a little bit warm, but weather was very good. Had my whole family here for Shabbos, so it was actually pretty crowded Friday night, and then Sabbath day, a whole bunch of people came over also. So earplugs are always good, right? So that always, always good. So one quick announcement: this class is going to be in memory of my father's yortzeit, is the anniversary of his passing was 6 years ago. 6 years ago today, and also happens to be my anniversary. So my wedding
anniversary.
So I can never forget either one because my father died on my anniversary. So should be a elevation for his soul. Nachum Dov ben Shmuel. So this class should be dedicated to him. So we are holding by chapter 1, Mishnah 15, as we work our way through. And Shammai, I think you were waiting for this one, or maybe for the next Mishnah, we'll see. Shammai says, make your Torah study a fixed practice. Say little, do much. Receive everyone with a cheerful face. All right, so we'll tackle the first parts. Well, actually, even in the middle, before we even get to the first part, the Mishnah says, say little and do much. There are a lot of people that talk, and they have big mouths, and you know who you are, right? So it's better just to do, is to say little, don't open up your big mouth, and do a lot, right? It's not about Judaism is not about philosophy, right? There is a lot of Jewish philosophy within Judaism, right? But Judaism is about action. Right? It's about what we do, right? It doesn't really matter what we think in our heart, because the Talmud tells us, Devarim shebalev eino devarim. In general, words in our heart don't really mean anything. So there are a lot of Jews out there, probably 90% of Jews out there, we'll call them, in my language, a cardiac Jew, right? What's the cardiac Jew? The cardiac Jew is the Jew that says, I'm good, right? I don't have to do anything. I'm good in my heart. Well, so what? What is goodness? I mean, I could ask 20 different questions what it means to be good. What it means is I'm okay. I don't do too many things wrong or whatever, but it doesn't matter. You got to act. It doesn't matter what you know, what you don't know. Judaism's about action. We'll get there. The first part of the Mishnah is make your Torah study a fixed practice. All right, for Jews, we'll see how this applies to non-Jews, right? The essence of your day should be spent learning Torah, in the ideal sense, and then you should work. Now, if you spend most of your day working, now obviously you're going to tell me, how can I do that? I still have an obligation to feed my family, right? That's definitely true. That's definitely true. And someone will just mention this because it's kind of funny. Someone mentioned, about the fact that, certain class I give for, conversion, and on duties of the heart, etc. How can you charge for that, right? I have a video we did on Tanakh Talk about charging for that, but what did this person say? He said, I got a real job. I don't have to charge people for my Torah. Yeah, because the Torah is not worth anything. But, okay, you're going to say, oh, look at him. He charges money. I got a real job. Thank you very much. Yeah, so if you spend most of your day working, which most people have an obligation to do, and a person's going to say, okay, I'll learn when I have time. We're going to see, the Mishnah says, how do you know? You ever have time? Right? How do I know that? Right? You're going to say, okay, when I retire. Then we're going to sit and learn. And what are you going to do? You're going to watch the stock market. You're going to do other things. You'll go in your boat. You'll, whatever. And then it's game over. right? Then in my language, checkmate, you're going to die, right? So it's no good, right? They say, oh, when I have time, I'll learn. Now, it doesn't mean, as we're talking over here, it doesn't mean a person shouldn't have a livelihood. We're not saying, okay, you're going to rely on God 100%. God's going to take care of my needs, right? There are two opinions, two schools of thought. One school of thought is, if you hold like Rev Elijah of Vilna, the Vilna Gaon says that if you live your life that 100%, right? In other words, everything you do, I'm not putting my best foot forward. I'm not doing anything. Right, we've spoken about this before. If you live your life to that level, then God takes care of your needs. Comes on the Chovos Levavos and duties of the heart, and he says, no. He says, you got to put your best foot forward. He said, God's going to do the rest, but you still have to put your best foot forward. So over here, it doesn't mean you say, hey, I got to make it a fixed practice. I got to study all the time. So I have to study all the time. How am I going to eat? I'm not going to be able to eat, right? It doesn't mean you shouldn't have a livelihood. But it means you got to be focused. The most important thing is to focus on your learning. And when you're not learning, when you're not learning, fine, then you get an exemption, right? But if you're not working, right? If you're not working, then you have an obligation to learn. So okay, there has to be a balance, right? A person's married, they have kids, right? There's certain times you have to spend with the family, etc. That's very true. But at the end of the day, focus has to be on learning. Right, obviously this is for men. Women have different obligations altogether, right? But certainly they need to learn also. They have to live inspired. They can't just sit around doing whatever. They also have to be going to classes, etc. Now, if men and women were equal in that sense, God would say, what do I care? Go get a babysitter, figure it out, right? You have to learn as much as a man. Now, obviously, is that the case? Not the case, right? Women and men, have different obligations. There's a great rabbi once spoke to a bunch of feminists, and he's speaking about women, women in Judaism. So he asked them the $1 million question. He goes, is there any difference between men and women? And they go, no. So he asked them again. He goes, is there any difference whatsoever you can think of between men and women? He says, I got one. Women can have children. Men can't, right? Still science can't figure that one out. Gonzo, can't happen. Right? So say, no, we're equal. No, they're different. They're not equal. They're different. They have different roles. Right? A Kohen can't do the same thing as a Levite. Levi can't do the same thing as a Kohen. And a Yisrael means everybody else can't do the same as either one of them. Which today doesn't really make so much of a difference. It's not, and if the temple existed, it'd be a whole different thing. It would be like a shortstop in baseball saying, I want to be the pitcher. And he's never pitched. He's like, I want to be the pitcher. Okay. Can you pitch? No, but I want to be the pitcher. You're going to ruin the team. You're going to get out there. People are going to smack it all over the place, right? If you could play. So does that mean the shortstop's more inferior than the pitcher? No, everyone has a certain position, to play. I saw this, someone posted on Friday, was really on Friday, about, the fact that he wants to convert and he can't convert because of his wife, etc. And, he really wants to and he can't. And, he heard that non-Jews are inferior to Jews. And it really burns him up. And why can't I do this? And why can't I do that? And, and all that. And some people were telling him it's not true. Where'd you get that information from? So he said, I heard Rabbi say it's brought down in the Tanya, it's brought down in other places. So, I was going back and forth with this person saying there's plenty what to learn. There's plenty what to do. I could keep you busy for the next 250 years as a non-Jew. Even without conversion, there's Jewish philosophy to learn. There's Tanakh to learn, the writings, the prophets. There's Musar, right? Yeah. Right? There's ethics. We've been going through this, 5 months? We're still in the first chapter. There's plenty what to learn. So this person really felt bad and this and that. And so he said, but is it really true? Is it really true what they say about non-Jews? So I said, the Ramchal and Derech Hashem and the way of God says a non-Jew certainly doesn't have the same spiritual makeup, right? Doesn't have the same aspects of the soul. So they're different. Why in the world should you think, you should think they should be on the same level, right? And this really, bothered the person. What? I'm subhuman, right? I'm an animal. We're not saying, We're not saying that 100%, even though, we mentioned before the Talmud does say that because the non-Jew doesn't have the same mitzvahs, right? If they don't have the same mitzvahs, so the whole difference between Jews and non-Jews, right? Even though they have their mitzvahs for themselves. So a person got thrown off, and he says, why should that be? Well, what do you mean, why should that be? It should be because you didn't accept the Torah. You and your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents didn't accept the Torah. So when someone chirped in and said, oh, that's what it means, the sons of the fathers goes on the sons, right? Goes on the children. So I said, what does that mean? That's a good quote, right? But what does that mean? It only means, if the father's bad or the parents are bad and you go in their evil ways, then that curse applies. If you don't go in those evil ways, the curse doesn't apply, right? Now, the non-Jews, let's just keep in mind, and this is an attitude, it's a bothersome attitude because they come out of Christianity, they come out of idolatry, and they say, I want to do these things like a Jew does. Not 100%, but they want to learn Talmud, they want to do other things, right? At the end of the day, Talmud tells us clear, God went to all the nations. And when he went to all the nations, for example, he goes to Yishmael, right? He goes to the Muslims. They say, you want to keep Torah? And he says, what's written in it? It says, don't steal. It says, don't steal. What does the Torah say? He says, my hand will be in the hand of everyone, and their hand will be in mine. That's my livelihood. That's what I do. I still have caps, right? Okay, so Muslims are going to get upset. Say, oh, look, this is what the Torah says about our great-great-grandfather. Torah doesn't lie. It's from God, right? God spoke to Moshe. That's his nature. Now, can he overcome his nature? Can overcome his nature. He's just at a disadvantage, right? So the Muslims say, so Yishmael said, oh, that's my livelihood. Not interested. Goes to Esav. Goes to good old Uncle Esav, Yaakov's brother. Says you want the Torah? And he says, what's written in it? Says, don't kill. Right? But what did he get? What was the blessing he got? By the sword you live. He said, it's in our genes. It's in our blood, we kill. No, we're not interested. So the Talmud says God went to all the nations. All the nations gave different excuses why they didn't want it. Come to the Jewish people. What do the Jewish people say? Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do, then we will hear. God says, you want to know what's in it? Nope. You got a track record. Took us out of Egypt, right? Did miracles in the desert. All these different things. I don't have an issue, right? We don't have an issue. So come along, the non-Jews. Now the non-Jews come out of Christianity. He says, no, I want a part of it. What are you talking about? You rejected the Torah. Your great-great-great-great-grandparents rejected the Torah. So now you want to weasel your way in? And now you want to say like these stupid super Noahites say, I can keep Shabbos. I'll do something to break it, but I can keep Shabbos. Shabbos not off limits. Really? What does the Torah tell me? It's a sign between God and the Jewish people. There are a few things like that. Shabbos is one. Tefillin, phylacteries are another. And that's why I don't wear them on Shabbos, because you don't need two signs. Right? Someone will say, oh, but didn't God give Shabbos to the entire world? Right? Genesis chapter 2, he created Shabbos. Didn't say who he gave it to. Get to Exodus chapter 20. So now you want to cop an attitude. Oh, I should have a part in that. Why should I have a part in it? You rejected it. So up until a certain point, even up until God gave the Torah, says Moshe Chaim Lutzato, the Ramchal, in Derech Hashem, in the way of God, what did he say? He says they could have been part of the Jewish people at that point. But the fact is, they didn't. So now it's closed. You want to be part of the Jewish people, now you have to go through this terrible thing called conversion. Okay. That's what people have to do. If you want to be part of it. If you don't want to be part of it, you can still eat shrimp, right? It's not an issue. You can still do what you need to do and still have a portion of the world to come. Now, I'll ask you the $1 million, why'd I go into all that? Because now this guy's going to cop an attitude and says, what am I, a second-class citizen? Now, let me ask you. You don't have the same mitzvahs as a Jew. Let's say altogether you have 70, 65, 70, right? We have 613, right? 613, a lot of them we can't do. We don't have a temple. Some things we can't do because we're not in the land of Israel, right? Or some people are not in the land of Israel or whatever, but we have many more mitzvahs. If we have many more mitzvahs, do you think you're going to be equal to where we should be in the world to come? Why should you think that? And if you were supposed to be equal, right? Let's call a spade a spade. If you were supposed to be equal, then you would have been Jewish. If God wanted everyone to be Jewish, they would have been. Obviously, there's a purpose for the nations. So you can say, but it's not fair. I want to do this and I want to do that, right? So again, we'll go back to checkmate. Do you believe God gave the Torah to the Jewish people, or he didn't? And if he did, are there limits, right? Are there limitations? Are there things you can do exactly like a Jew? So this person, if he knows anything, he'll say, oh, look at the Rambam. The Rambam says, any mitzvah I do, I get merit for. Yeah, but that's limited. That is definitely limited, right? So therefore, you can't quote something, take it out of context, and say, oh yeah, if I do this, I'll get credit. Or I want to be the super Noahide, or I want to do this. There are limitations. Either you want to hold by what the Torah says and do what it says, or you don't. And if you don't, okay, that's your choice. Don't go bad-mouthing other people that don't agree with you because you have a claim that no one else holds of, right? And your gurus out there, quote unquote, don't have any backing, right? They don't have any backbone. They don't have any rabbinic authorities that hold anything that you say, anything at all. You can't prove anything. And anyone who disagrees with you, what do you say? You say, oh, you don't know anything. Oh, you don't know how to learn. Oh, this, they'll call you names. That's what a rabbi does. That's what rabbinical authorities do. No, you're an idiot, right? Because the Talmud says, if you want to learn by somebody, we mentioned this before, if you want to learn by a rabbi, he has to look in your eyes as an angel. Now, it doesn't mean he's perfect, right? But for goodness sakes, you have to hold him on a higher pedestal. You have to hold them on a higher pedestal. And I got this question a lot. Hey, if this rabbi calls people out, he calls them names and this and that. He said, what kind of person is he? That's a good question. It means his character traits are out of whack. It means you ruffled his feathers because you didn't agree with him. And it's my way or the highway, right? We're not saying it's my way or the highway. We're saying this is what the Torah says. This is what the Talmud says. You want to have a discussion? You want to have a discussion? You can have a discussion. You want to start calling people out and whatever? Okay, that's a different thing, right? But at the end of the day, one of the things that I'm very big in is, okay, you want to show your knowledge, but you have to show also your credentials. And if you don't have credentials, then you have no right to speak, right? That's the bottom line. So here, when it comes to learning, as we mentioned, right, you should be focused on your learning. When you're not working, then you have an obligation to learn. Again, this applies to men, certainly not to women, but you have to know how to balance it, right? You have to have fixed amount of time, right, in order to do that. So my Rabbi tells a story of Rabbi Ephraim Margolios, Tzaddik Levracha, may his name be blessed. Rabbi Margolios was a businessman, and every day he would learn till 2 o'clock. Right? He told his wife, no matter who comes in, no matter what happens, I think I told the story before, but it's a good story. He says, no matter what happens, no one's allowed to disturb me. So what happened? One day someone comes in, a few guys come in, and they say, we need to see your husband. And his wife says, I can't disturb him until after 2 o'clock. Says, no, we got this business deal. Your husband's going to make 10,000 rubles in 10 minutes. Right? Surely he didn't mean that. Right? So his wife said, I'm under strict orders. I can't disturb him. And they kept pushing her, and she says, I'm not disturbing him. And that was it. And they thought he was crazy. How can it be? He's going to miss his big business deal, right? What happened? Comes out of learning. His wife tells him the story, and he was dancing. He was absolutely dancing. He said, I can't believe God thought my learning, he was a big Adam Gadol. He was a tremendous rabbinic scholar, right? And he said, I can't believe God thinks my learning is worth 10,000 rubles. It's unbelievable. So a person has to have fixed times to learn, right? Regardless of what they're doing. In other words, it should be consistent. It should be the same time every day. Now, obviously, we're busy. We have all kinds of things to do and whatever. But a person should try and make that time sacred. No matter what happens between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock, 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock, whatever it is, that time period, no matter what happens, unless your house is on fire or something like that, you're not moving from your learning, whatever you're doing. Now, also, what does it mean, a fixed practice? Here, a person shouldn't be stringent on himself, lenient on others, or stringent on others and lenient on themselves. But what should you do? You should make your Torah a fixed practice, i.e., for you and for others, it should be the same. The passion you have to learn because you want to change your life should be practiced just like everyone else. Now, there's a caveat over here. Even though a person, let's say, shouldn't be stringent on himself and lenient on others, right? So we have to clarify that because there are people that will have stringencies. They'll have their own stringencies, but they're not going to force it on others, right? They won't force it on their family, or whatever, unless obviously they think it's so important, right? They should be doing it themselves, right? But at the end of the day, a person wants to take on stringencies. Who says it has to be at the expense of your wife and your kids, right? Or other people. In other words, I had someone asked me the other day about tikkun chatzos. What is tikkun chatzos? It's like getting up after midnight and saying all these prayers and things about and sitting on the floor and languishing about the destruction of the temple. Right? So there are great people that do that. Then they stay up all night and learn, or they stay up a good part of the night. So someone asked me if this was a good thing to do. So I said it depends. If you're able to, however much you want to stay up at night, and do it, and you're able to function or whatever. Most people don't do it, right? Most people certainly don't do it. But it says, is it an important thing, and it can help this and help that? Yeah, but if it's going to destroy, the essence of your day because you're going to be too tired, and then you can't learn, you can't do other things, then obviously it's not good. Now, there is a tremendous thing. I'm not saying not, right? But Rav Victor Miller, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, may his name be blessed, said, someone asked him this question. It was really funny. It was about, a few months ago or more. So, because someone else had asked me that question also. It was actually a woman, not a guy. But even so, Rav Victor Miller said, for our generation, sit on the floor for a minute and a half. 2 minutes. Think about the destruction of the temple. That's it. I can tell me all these great things that occur or that can help you in different things by, getting up in the middle of the night. Listen, I do it twice a week. It's not easy. Get up at 3:30 in the morning, right? It can throw off your day, if you don't go to sleep on time, and you need a certain amount of sleep as well, right? That's why you call me the Energizer Bunny and just keep going. Thursday night, anyone who saw it, I went on this rant. I didn't go to sleep till after midnight. I was up at 3:30, right? So caught up a little bit on Shabbos. But to do that every night, unless, you're going to sleep during the day and it's not going to interfere, right? It's not going to interfere in your learning, then, okay. But most people don't do it, right? Even if you tell me, well, I could do it to my body. I only need, 5 hours of sleep and, a night or 6 hours of sleep, even though the Rambam says you really need 8, regardless, if you're able to sleep during the day, maybe, right? But for most people, they're not going to do it. And most people don't do it. Doesn't mean it's not important, right? But certainly for someone starting out and someone learning, forget it. It's not worthwhile, right? With all the benefits that it has, it's going to destroy you in other ways, right? Certainly not worthwhile. Comes along, people want to do make up for lost time, because, they haven't been learning for a long time or whatever the case is. So they want shortcuts, right? In other words, I'll do this and this is going to bring this benefit, this spiritual benefit, or I'll do that or whatever. And the evil inclination won't stop you, especially the month of Elul where, before Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, a person's working on themselves and the evil inclination leaves you alone, right? Totally leaves you alone. You're working hard, this, that, you stay up late. You have slichos, say penitential prayers the week before Rosh Hashanah. Certainly for Ashkenazim, for Sephardic Jews, they start from the beginning of the month of Elul. Whatever the case is, and a person's working and they're striving and they want to change or whatever. Comes Rosh Hashanah, evil inclination says, yeah, I'll leave you alone on Rosh Hashanah also. You want to work on your spiritual self, very good. Leave you alone for that. 10 days of repentance. Yom Kippur, I'll leave you alone for that. And then you come Sukkot, right? Then you go sit in the Sukkah. And sitting in the Sukkah, what's a Sukkah all about? Temporary residence, right? You're living in a hut, and it's cold outside in most places, etc. You're thinking about this world as temporary. And, you're on the spiritual high. There are a lot of things that you go to, that you see. Well, maybe not now. We'll see what happens See what happens then. Regardless of all that, it puts you, then what's the end of the holiday is Simchas Torah. Bring out all the Torahs, everyone's dancing, everyone's celebrating. You finish the Torah, now you're starting from the beginning. You're on like a spiritual high this whole time. It comes on, the evil inclination says, I'll give you everything. Not a problem. You want to work on this? No problem. You want to work on that? No problem. I'm not going to stop you. Comes after Sukkot, bam. You want to hold to the high level. I'm going to put this in front. I'm going to put that in front of you. You want to work on other things and stay up late or whatever. I'll make you more tired. I'll do this, right? I'll leave you alone at a certain point. But at the end of the day, when you're vulnerable, and you say, oh, let me do this. Let me stay up every night or get up in the middle of the night, get 5 hours of sleep and look what spiritual level I'm going to reach. Evil inclinations like, go ahead. I'm not even going to stop you. I'm going to encourage you. Go ahead. What's the problem? The problem is the person does it, they'll fall flat on their face. They won't be able to keep up the schedule, right? That's one of the major questions people ask. They said, you give all these classes during the week, 2 in the middle of the night, you're answering questions, doing this, doing that. It says, when do you sleep? Well, I definitely do sleep. That is true, right? But, I wouldn't tell people necessarily to take my schedule. But at the end of the day, you got to put yourself in a position where you're going to succeed, regardless of what the spiritual remuneration is going to be. Getting up in the middle of the night and doing this is a tremendous thing, but it could destroy you every day because your body can't handle it. Now, if you're going to tell me I'll go to sleep at 8 o'clock at night, which you won't, but let's say you would do that and you get enough sleep, okay, that's one thing. Right? But, how long is a person going to be able to do that? So comes along Rabbeinu Yonah, famous Rabbeinu Yonah of Garandi, and he explains from Avos to Rabbi Nosson, and he wants to look it up, chapter 28. He says, anyone who makes his Torah a fixed practice and work is secondary, i.e. they have to work because they have to put food on the table. So he says that they make, they work out a schedule, they learn a certain amount and they work the rest or whatever the case is, and they make themselves a fixed practice in that sense, then they are going to have a fixed place in the world to come. In other words, if they make the essence of what they do Torah, right, then their fixed place in the next world is going to be tremendous. But anyone who makes the fixed practice of Torah secondary and work takes priority, then their place in the world to come, even if they get there, is going to be secondary. Not only that, even if someone doesn't sin, right? They're on a very high level and they don't sin, but he makes his Torah learning a fixed practice, then even if they merit to be in paradise, i.e. the Garden of Eden, they'll still be considered secondary. Now, this is a pretty potent statement. So what this means is like this. A person has to work. So when they don't work and they don't have an obligation to be with family or whatever, they have to have fixed time to study. So if they know work is secondary, even though I have to do it for what reason, got to put bread on the table. Good. But if I understand the most important thing is learning Torah, and I have to work because I have to put bread on the table, then your fixed place in the world to come, that merit, that reward you're going to get is absolutely tremendous. Nothing to talk about. Now, on the other hand, if your fixed practice of Torah is secondary, you're doing it because you have to do it, whatever, but the most important thing to me is working. Now again, working is important, right? You have to put bread on the table. The question is, what's my mentality? How do I view what I do for work? Is work only to put food on the table? In other words, it can help me spiritually, right? Live in this world properly. That's one thing. But if work is the ultimate, is the most important thing, and then learning Torah is secondary, then even if now listen to this statement, even if you didn't sin, even if you had fixed time to learn, right? Says the Avos, the Rabbi Nosson, even if that was the case, your place in paradise in the Garden of Eden is going to be considered secondary. How can that be? I got fixed times to learn. I didn't sin. There are only 4 or 5 people that never sinned and only died because of the sin of Adam and Eve, right? They had never sinned. Even though the prophet says no one's gone through this world, and hasn't sinned, there are a few people, the Talmud says, never sinned. But if this person never sinned, they have fixed times to learn, but their learning to them is secondary to work. They are going to be considered secondary in the world to come. That is a mind-boggling thing. And the reason is because what's your focus? Your focus is work. Well, of course my focus is work. Got to put food on the table. No. That's your obligation. That 100% is your obligation. The bottom line is, how do I view it? Right? This is the difference. I've gotten this question a lot, so I'll flush this out a drop. This is the difference between an ultra-Orthodox community and a modern Orthodox community. In an ultra-Orthodox community, what is the single most important thing? The single most important thing is Torah scholarship, is learning. So therefore, how do they view making a living? Okay, they have to do something to make a living, but their main focus in life is learning. That's the most important thing. Okay, you have to be in the secular world. You have to work. You have to put food on the table. But am I saying that's the most important thing in my life? That's what rules my life? No. In the modern Orthodox world, not everybody. I'm not going to make a blanket statement, right? But a lot of people, the most important thing to them is work. And they're into work, and they're into sports, and they're into other things, right? But the most important thing to them really is work. And they get caught up in making money and business and whatever, and they're totally caught up in it. Secondary is Torah, right? And I was part of that world. I saw it, with my own eyes. At the end of the day, I always use this as an example. Sorry about my camera here. I always use it as an example, and that is that in that world, either what you're gonna have. Sorry. One second.
Okay, Rabbi. I'm busy arguing online with our troll friend, and
okay. So anyway, the point is that how do they view the world? They view the world as the most important thing is work, right? It's definitely work. Not that you have to make a living, right? That is totally encompassing. So if it's totally encompassing, what happens? Okay, they learn Torah, they go to a class, whatever it is, but that's not the most important thing. They're doing it because they do it. They got an obligation to learn, so good. That's what they do. So I mentioned this many times. A number of years ago here in Israel, they appointed rabbinic court judges by the chief rabbinate. They appointed rabbinic court judges. Now, they appointed 22 judges. Out of the 22 judges, 15 came from the ultra-Orthodox camp. 15 out of 22, even Yitro can do this, is 58%. Right? That's 58%. 58% that came from one community and not another. So that would mean there's something going on. Right? You can say, oh, that's discrimination. No, they're taking the best of the best, right? Who know all about the laws of damages and marriage and, whatever, pass the exam, etc. Because Torah scholarship in that community is the most important thing. There is nothing else more important. Now, again, doesn't mean you don't have to put food on the table. We're not talking about that. You obviously have an obligation for that. Question is how we view it. Do we view it in a way where the obligation is okay, I have to do it, and learning is something else. Learning, okay, I still have to learn, right? Or do I view it as learning is really the ultimate? I'm making a living, okay, you gotta do something to make a living, but really the ultimate is learning. That's a major difference. And the main reason now that I'm married 28 years and I left that camp, that was the main reason, because I saw the Torah scholarship, in that community among a lot of people was very weak. Even among people even among people going to be rabbis, and that scared the dickens out of me, because someone who learns, okay, and they pass the exam. What makes someone a rabbi today? Someone asked me that recently. So there are certain exams a person passes. These are the laws of Shabbos, the laws of Kashrus. You have to master a certain amount of material. Now, does that make you an expert in the entire Talmud? I don't think it does, right? Nonetheless, you have a certain status, right? Someone becomes a lawyer, someone becomes a doctor, right? There are certain things you have to do and certain things you have to pass. Good, right? Very, very good. Now, even if you do that, right? Even if you have a certain level of knowledge, is that the same as someone who's gone through the entire Talmud? That's not the same. Not even close. Someone has, let's say a wider amount of knowledge, right? And I'll tell you the following story. When I met my Rabbi more than 20 years ago, I wanted to go out and save the world, go out into the world of Kiruv, doing Jewish outreach, and I was teaching at a school. Every so often, a few times a week, and I spoke to the head of the yeshiva there, and he said, "Listen, you're a natural. You don't have to be trained." He said, "How are you learning?" I said, "My learning's going great. I'm learning one tractate, another tractate, etc." And he said, "Well, how are you doing financially?" I said, "No problem." He said, "I can't take someone out of learning in order to go do this." He says, "You have to speak to a giant, a Torah giant." So I was learning with someone at the time who became close to my Rebbe in South Africa. He drew him close to Torah. And he said, "I'll take you to go speak to him. He speaks English." So I said, "Great." He's originally born and bred in England, still drinks tea with milk. So, you can't beat the Englishman out of the Englishman. Anyway, I went to see him. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what books he wrote. And I didn't really know anything about him. I went to speak to him, and he started speaking English, and I almost fainted. I was like, "Say what? You speak English?" Like, wow, that's great. So I asked him my question. And he basically said, if you don't have any issues with livelihood and you're learning up a storm, he said, I give you a blessing. He said, I give you a blessing that when, you should sit and learn as long as you can. He said, and then afterwards you go out like a ball of fire. So I told him, I said, no offense. I said, honorable rabbi, no offense, but you just crushed my dream in like 30 seconds. I said, this is something I've wanted to do since I was a teenager. So I told him that if I'm going to listen to you, and I'm going to put myself down, so to speak, and listen to what the Rav has to say, then you're going to have to be the one to teach me. What did he tell me? He said, bli neder. He said, without a vow. Now, I got to him through chutzpah, and I kept making up questions. When are we going to learn? One of this, one of that. And in the end, that's how I developed my, my connection to him. In either case, what did he say? He said, if you got an opportunity to sit and learn, he said, I don't want you to be like these Mickey Mouse rabbis. He was talking about Orthodox rabbis. We're not talking about conservative rabbis. We're talking about Reform rabbis. He said, the more knowledge you have, the more Talmud you've gone through, the more commentaries you've gone through, right? The more Jewish philosophy, Musar you've gone through. He said, I promise you. He said, I'm already an old man. He's already in his late 60s, early 70s. He goes, I'm already an old man thinking about the next world. I'm like, say what? He's like, I don't really live in this world. I'm already I'm already preparing for the next world. The guy in ours should be well. It's like, in his mid-90s, right? So, still going strong. So in any case, he said, if you have an opportunity to sit and learn, he said, why in the world would you pass up that opportunity to do outreach? Doing outreach is a tremendous thing. He said, but you could cut yourself short in learning, right? In other words, that's a knock on certain places. They teach someone like 3-4 years, pass a few exams, they send them out. Now, can they be successful? Not saying they can't be successful, right? When I was in Chile, there was someone, doing Jewish outreach with teenagers and different things, and I asked him a few questions. This guy had no idea there were even issues, right? And, in doing outreach. I had no idea. I'm not going to go into the issues, but in general, how could you do this? The Talmud says like this. The Code of Jewish Law says like this. Not so simple. Didn't have an answer. He said, what do you mean? Well, like, what's the issue? I go, did you ever learn? Did you ever learn this? Whatever. So, obviously the more you learn, the more qualified, certainly the more qualified you are. Now, again, Again, there are people who learn, obviously they don't remember everything. Does it make them a rabbinical court judge? No, that's something more, more specific going into Jewish law, and other things. Today, people just focus on like one thing. They'll focus on Jewish law. They'll focus on, whatever it is, but they won't necessarily focus on finishing Talmud, right? That's a magnum opus to finish, right? I'm on the way. I got, a bunch of more tractates to finish, but, I'm almost there. So the goal is obviously having the breadth of knowledge, right? And having knowledge enough where you can answer people's questions. In other words, you have to know Jewish law. No question about it. And if you don't know, you're not sure, obviously you have to go ask. You have to go ask people. But at the same time, you have to learn in depth, and you have to learn at a quicker pace, as well, because, if you only learn in depth, you'll never finish any tractate. If you learn at a quicker pace, you're never going to understand anything fully, right? So, you need sort of a hybrid, which most yeshivas take today. In the morning, they'll learn much more in depth. In the afternoon, they'll go at a quicker pace. But by the end of the year, depending on how long the tractate is, they'll finish it. But they'll have a breadth of it, right? So why do I bring this up? Because I saw people learning, okay, the laws of Shabbos, 10 pages over here, 5 pages over here, this, that. They're not accomplishing. Not finishing the tractate. I'm not saying they're never going to in their lives, but don't make the mistake and think, oh, I have all this knowledge, I know something. Right? Because I'll give an example. It's not really such a good example, but I'll give an example. Someone's got a PhD, right? I think I mentioned this earlier. I heard a great rabbi say, everyone knows what a BA is. An MA is more of it. A PhD is pilot higher and deeper. Right? So what is a PhD? Now, I only have a BA. I only have an undergraduate degree in history. Big deal, from an Ivy League school. Okay, it doesn't matter. Right? But someone has a PhD. What's really a PhD? And they give all kinds of honor, right, for it. I'm not saying, a person writes a 100-page paper, they take oral exams. I'm not scoffing and saying that that's nothing and that's not work. Not saying that. But, my specialty was World War II, right? So imagine if I wrote a book on the socioeconomic rise of the Third Reich between the years 1933 and 1940. Now, does that make me a world expert in World War II? Not necessarily. It means I know one aspect of one subject, right? 1/10 of 1/20th of a subject, right? Now, I walk down the street, someone's going to stand up for me for all that secular knowledge because I have a PhD? It's ludicrous, Okay, I'm not saying the person doesn't have that knowledge in that subject, right? But it's not the entire subject. Someone goes to medical school, right? They have to do, after they learn, they have to figure out what they're gonna go into, right? Which thing they're gonna go into. So someone who's a GP, right, a general practitioner, so good. So they know, a lot about a lot of different things, or maybe a little about a lot of different things, makes them knowledgeable in nothing. I don't know exactly, but they end up getting a lot of this knowledge. But most other people focus. Right? They'll focus on certain things. That makes them an expert in that field. Does that make them an expert in medicine in general? Doesn't. It doesn't. But, again, someone's got a PhD, people worship that. And they worship academia and all these things. It doesn't really mean a whole lot. Someone who knows the breadth of Talmud, and it has that breadth of knowledge, that's a whole different ballgame. Now, that doesn't mean they know every last law in Jewish law. Doesn't make them an expert in Jewish law. That's a whole different thing, right? That's what it's extrapolated from learning. Okay, so either you have people that are great in Jewish law, or you have them great in the breadth that they know in Talmud. Normally, you don't see both. It's very hard. I've seen a few great people, a few great rabbis that have the breadth in Jewish law and have the breadth in learning. It's very, very rare. Very, very rare that they have both. Right? But what am I focusing on here is what's the most important thing in a person's life? Right? Is the most important thing that no matter what you're doing when you have free time, right? You're not on your phone, you're not watching the stock market, and you're not watching these riots or whatever. You're learning when you have free time. right? When you're not obligated to deal with your family, etc., and you're not working. But if you're wasting your time when you could have learned, that is pretty bad, right? That is something Talmud says God does not forgive. He'll forgive the big three, right? The Jerusalem Talmud tells us, one second, he'll forgive idolatry, immorality, and murder. But the fact you had an opportunity to learn and you didn't, that he doesn't forgive. Now those three, you have to give up your life every time, no matter time and place. For a Jew has to give up their life for idolatry, immorality, or murder. Wasting time when I could have learned. God, those are the big three. And God says, I'll forgive those. But when you had an opportunity to learn and you wasted your time because you're on your stupid phone or doing something else, when you could have learned, God's going to say that I'm going to throw the book at you. I don't care what you know. I don't know where you've been. It's totally irrelevant. You had an opportunity to learn. You didn't take the opportunity to learn. This is what it says, that even if you didn't sin, and that's what the novelty here is that even if you didn't sin and you merited to be in paradise, you are going to be secondary. Secondary. It doesn't mean you're a schlep, you never learned. We're not talking about that. You sat there wasting time watching the CFL when you could have been doing something else. Now, for sure, you're going to be secondary, someone like that. But in that case, you didn't sin. How many people in the world can say they've never sinned? There only been 4 or 5 in the world, the Talmud tells us. Nobody else. And even if you didn't sin, you're considered secondary in the world to come. That is mind-boggling. Yeah, you had a question.
Well, no, when you were talking about study, and taking the time to study, I just know in this day and age, with the internet, the access, people wandering around here in North America with cell phones, they bang into poles and they step off of curbs because they're paying attention on their phone. But a lot of people will spend computer time at work or on their cell phones, and they think they're doing God's service, doing Torah study. And it's fine on a break. As a Noahide, we're not supposed to steal. And if you're doing it on company time, you in fact stealing from your employer. Is that true?
That is true. I mean, if you have a break, you can do what you want, right? If you don't have a break, and you're checking your email, or you're seeing someone sent you a text, or whatever. Yeah. If they allow it here and there, half a second here, a minute there, they're not gonna be on top of you about it. It could be they'll look the other way. Obviously, if a person's taking, serious chunks of time, yeah, if you're taking serious chunks of time, that's for sure. But according to the strict letter of the law, 100%. In other words, they don't give you ability to do that. You have to ask, right? I remember certain things I wanted to print out. I was working for a title company, and I asked. I said, I have a few pages or whatever. Are they going to mind if I print it out? Right? So they said no. I got a book, 50 pages. Okay, that they're going to mind. That they're going to mind, even if it's a downtime, right? But obviously things like that, and these are common things. Like what's expected, what I'm allowed to do, etc. A person. You don't have a break. You don't have a break, but whatever, you're thirsty. You go get a cup of coffee, tea, whatever, but then you sit there lingering around. Okay, they're going to tell you it's permissible to get a drink. They're not going to say not, or, you're noshing on something or whatever, but you can't sit there for 20 minutes, right? You don't have a break. It's not your break time, right? You're certainly not allowed to do that. Now, keep in mind for a Noahide, I didn't even speak about learning for a Noahide. We'll get to that in a second. But in this case, I mentioned, in a few of my Q&As last week or the week before with all this looting and everything else, that whatever a non-Jew has to keep, whatever their obligation is, right? One of them is don't steal, right? So now you troll, right? Anything universal, a non-Jew has to keep. Don't steal. Does that apply to a non-Jew? Yes, it does. Forget oral law. It applies to a non-Jew, right? Don't kill. Applies to a non-Jew. It's what the Torah says. Question is, what's the definition, right? What's the definition? How much do I have to steal to be liable? Come on, you Karaites. What's the answer? $5? $3?
Anything.
$1.50? What's the answer? Tell me according to the Torah what the answer is. According to the prophets, according to the writings. You don't have an answer. Checkmate. Why don't you have an answer? Because Torah doesn't tell me. It just says it's forbidden. Right? Now, we understand anything that's universal, a non-Jew has to keep. All these looters, right? All these looters, they steal. Okay, now you have to go to oral law. You're not going to like this. They're liable for a death penalty. Anything they do. Now you're going to say, why is that severe? The rabbis are making it up. Good, the rabbis are making it up. Why is it so severe? Because it's universal, according to the Torah. Don't steal is universal, right? Don't kill is universal. Idolatry is only one God. Should be universal. You might have a question. What about, can I play with nature? Can I take a donkey and a horse, put them together and make a mule? Now, God doesn't stop people from doing that. But as everyone knows, or if you don't, you'll know now, a mule is a tremendously strong animal. There's only one problem with the mule. Sterile. Don't you think that's a punishment? Sounds like a punishment to me. You make this incredibly strong animal and it can't reproduce. Now, does that apply to a non-Jew? Is that something universal? So then you have to ask the question, without getting into anything else, if it's universal, am I allowed to play with creation? Am I allowed to create other species? Well, you see, God doesn't stop you. That wasn't the question, right? You know, you go into a store, you get a nectarine. What's a nectarine? It's a hybrid between a peach and a plum. Now, for a Jew, it's forbidden. What about a non-Jew? Now, you can derive benefit from it. You're allowed. There are certain things you're not allowed to derive benefit from. Certain things you are allowed to derive benefit from. This you're allowed to derive benefit from. Good. Now, what about a non-Jew? What about a non-Jew? Does that apply? Torah doesn't tell me, does it? Torah just says you're not allowed to do this for Jews. Good. How's a non-Jew going to know what to do? Doesn't apply to them or doesn't apply to them. If you're a Karaite, what's the answer? You don't have an answer because you never thought about it. So now you have to ask, okay, what is a non-Jew's obligation according to Torah? Right? Because a non-Jew, you know, the Torah tells me such a thing as a ger toshav. What's a ger toshav? Someone who lived amongst the Jewish people, didn't commit idolatry. Right? So, but what did they do? What did the non-Jews do if they lived amongst Jews? Did they keep Shabbos? I don't think so. Do they keep kashrus? They don't have to. Right? If you have a treif animal, I can give it to a ger. Who's the ger? It's not a Jew. The ger toshav. Right? All the ger people will be happy. Ha ha. It's a ger toshav. Right? Someone who's a non-Jew lives amongst Jews. Or even if they don't, I give it to them because they're not Jewish. I can give it to them. I can't give it to a Jew. It's treif. Right? It's not kosher. Right? So again, these things, if you read the Torah, right? You read the Torah, so we see what applies to Jews. No definitions. Okay. So now we have to understand what the obligation is and what don't kill and don't steal means. But what about other things? Don't lie. Do not take revenge. Does do not take revenge apply to non-Jews? The immoral laws. Does that apply to a non-Jew? I don't know. I would say, as a moral imperative, it should. Why? It's not a good character trait. Right? It's not good for their soul. Either they want to be close to God or they're going to be far away from God. Right? Is this good for me or not good for me? Right? Is he going to say, okay, what does the Torah tell me? Torah just tells me don't take revenge. Right? What does that mean? It means if you want to borrow someone's lawnmower and they say, nope, I'm not giving it to you. Their lawnmower breaks. They come to you. Your lawnmower works. You say, no, I'm not doing it because you didn't give it to me. That's forbidden. You know, tit for tat. You didn't do this to me. I'm not going to do this to you. Okay? That's forbidden for a Jew. Now, does that apply to a non-Jew? Torah doesn't tell me anything. Doesn't give me any boundaries. Doesn't even give me any boundaries for a Jew. Forget a non-Jew. Right? Does that apply to a non-Jew? What's the answer? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. As a moral imperative, I would say it does. Because it's not a good character trait. Does it come under, quote unquote, the Noahide laws that the rabbis made up? Ha ha. Right? Does it apply? Does it go according to that? Maybe. Or maybe it's only a moral imperative. Maybe you don't even have to come on to that. You just tell me it's a moral imperative. So any moral imperative, according to the Torah, should also be forbidden for a non-Jew, right? It has to do with morality. How do I know? How do I know what should apply and doesn't apply?
Well,
You have no answers. You have no answers because the Torah doesn't tell me. You want to bring me from Tanakh? You want to bring me from the writings? Okay, show me. Show me where it says and how this applies. Good, right? I'll wait for the sources. Right? So now learning for non-Jews. Does a non-Jew have an obligation to learn Torah like a Jew? No. Do they have an obligation to know what applies to them? That they do. Right? A non-Jew, let's say this Ger Toshav, he's not a Jew. So what is it? What does he do? What is he allowed to do? What is he not allowed to do? What are the boundaries? What are the parameters? Right? So obviously learning Torah, he's not going to learn things that don't apply to him. Right? That's why the Talmud is off limits. I did hear it in the name of a great rabbi. I never asked my Rabbi this, but there's certain tractates that deal with the laws of damages. Right? Exclusively with the laws of damages. One of the 7 Noahide laws, one of those laws is law courts. Right? You want to say, you want to say the rabbis made it up. Good. But again, don't you need law courts? They need law courts for non-Jews so they don't kill people, destroy people like what's going on now. You need law courts. 100%. You need law courts. That's one of the accusations against Shem in the story of Dinah, when Dinah gets abused. Why does Shimon and Levi destroy the whole city? They destroy all the males, right? They lie to them, we'll marry you, blah, blah, blah. They did circumcision, wiped them out. Why'd they wipe them out? What was their sin? Their sin was they defiled the daughter. Good. What about the rest of the people? He deserves to die. That's forbidden. What he did was forbidden. Right? Nothing to talk about. What about the rest of the people? How do the rest of the people not deserve to die? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense logically. Right? One explanation. About it, though. What? Say again?
They did nothing about it. They had no court.
That's the answer. That is the answer. And the answer is they knew about it and they didn't stop it. Right? What law does it come under? It comes under the law of dinim, of laws. They should have taken him in. They should have taken him in. Filed a report. The fact that they didn't do anything is like they agreed. If it's like they agreed, they're also liable. Right? But obviously there's a question. Right? If you're reading the Torah, at a literal, if you're reading it literally or critically, let's say better, you have to ask that question, right? And Yaakov says, what does he say? He says, you make me look bad over here. What'd you do, deserve? What'd you do? You're killing my name by destroying the entire city. But what did they answer? They didn't say it was about laws. They said, how could we not do anything and have our daughter abused? Right? That was their answer. And Yaakov still chastises them. Right? But so the commentaries ask, okay, we'll ask according to the commentaries, no choice. Why? Why the rest of the people? Why the rest of the males? They seemingly didn't deserve anything to die. Now again, this is a similar thing, and we'll mention it 150,000 times, and that is, there's a question. It's a legitimate question. Forget who asked it, doesn't matter. Anybody can ask the question. What's the answer? What's the answer within the Torah? What's the answer within the writings? What's the answer within the prophets? You want to be a Karaite? You can be a Karaite. Give me an answer. Give an answer according to that, why they should deserve to die. Now, you can't tell me they didn't die. Torah says clear, he killed them. They wiped out the entire city. All the males. That's what the Torah says. Fine. 1 second. Yaakov chastises them. He chastises them. He said you shouldn't have done it, whatever. Right? Question is, though, why did they do it? You say they got angry. But what? If God allowed it, doesn't matter if they got angry. If God allowed it, they must have been liable for something. Right? The people of Sodom die. Right? They were called evil in the eyes of God. What did they do that was so bad? What in the world did they do that was so bad in God's eyes? According to the written law. So we have later, I think in Ezekiel, writes how bad they were. So good. You can bring me a proof from that. Excellent. Right? There are other reasons. But yet you have to ask the question, if the Torah doesn't tell me, obviously there's something missing, right? I'm missing information, right? The entire city of Shechem does not deserve to be wiped off the face of the map based on what one person did. Imagine, okay, this guy gets killed, this black person gets killed. Now you take the officers that did it, you're going to wipe out his whole city? Because people were standing around and didn't do anything to help him. They couldn't stop him. So you wipe out. So this guy was in wherever it was, whatever city he lives in, Indianapolis, whatever. You're gonna say, okay, gonna wipe him out. Gonna wipe out the entire city. What do you mean? Wipe out the entire city? Makesher. What's the connection? Seemingly, there's no connection. But if other people are standing watching, just like Dan the man said, people are watching and they didn't do anything. They didn't turn them in. That means the entire place is liable. Yeah, question.
Yeah, Rabbi, because this tips into a lot of morality and a lot of ethics, especially where it comes into enforcement of what should be enforced. But my question really has to do is, where is the line? Like, we know in the story that you're just saying they did nothing, okay? But what about corrupt, visibly corrupt? Like, you hear horror stories of small town communities where you've got inbred sheriffs and you've got a whole family runs a town, and if you're from outside and you get, they'll just run amok, roughshod over you. It's just flagrantly unjust. Is that still a form of dinim? I mean, do we recognize it as a form of dinim?
No, so it's certainly corruption. Obviously, there's no place. And when it talks about law courts, it means law courts on the up and up. Right, so certainly not law courts that are, that are corrupt. The Torah tells me also that I have to go according to the majority. Right, now the majority means for good, not for bad. Right, somebody came, I forget who it was, came to one of the rabbis and says, "Hey, something your Torah to go after the majority? We're the majority. Why don't you go like us?" So the rabbi answered. He said, "Yeah, we only go after the majority when there's a doubt." When we have doubts. By us, we don't have any doubts. There are no doubts, right? So, if you have the mafia, let's say, running a town, a city or whatever, a small town, as you mentioned, right? Those laws, what we call dinim, in those law courts, they're Mickey Mouse courts, right? That's what they are. And therefore, going to one of them, that's not justice, right? Certainly not justice. Listen, in theory, two Jews have an argument, they have to go to a rabbinical court. Now, it could be there might be rabbinical courts on the take, God forbid, right? That could be, and there are better ones, there are worse ones, but there can be, rabbinical courts that are on the take, and that's a perversion of justice. So in secular court, you certainly can have that, and if you have a perversion of justice, that's not the law over here. Right, that's exactly what it is, the perversion of justice. You don't get away with that. Right? That's totally forbidden. So why doesn't God stop it? So I can't answer that. Yeah, go ahead.
We got a question here by John on YouTube,
Yeah.
and he's just asking, what about, we know you're really touching some potential issues here, but John's asking, what about abortion? In some areas they kill as much as 3,000 babies a day. Are we culpable for allowing that?
What can you do to stop it? Blow up an abortion center, like some people have tried to do in the past? You can't do that.
Extreme. Yeah, fundamentalist extremism is not.
Yeah, okay, that you can't do, right? So the only thing we can do is try and make it illegal, right? But you got the law of the land. Very hard to fight the law of the land. If you can make it illegal, how many abortions have been done in Israel? I mean, millions. It's crazy. The amount of abortions that have been done, I don't know, a few million or something like that. If these children would have lived, got married, have kids, etc., there'd be like 30, 40 million Jews. So there is a certain extent where you'd be allowed to do it at a certain point where it's not considered a life, right? What we consider not considered a life within 40 days. 40 days is nothing, right? But you can't just abort it for no reason, right? Obviously, you have to ask someone with very broad shoulders, if you're allowed to or not. At a certain point, you shouldn't be allowed to, unless it's endangering the mother, right? That's the difference between Judaism and Christianity. According to Judaism, you save the mother, you kill the child. According to Christianity, you kill the mother and you save the child, right? Two different opposite approaches. And the reason is either you go according to potential right now, or you go according to future potential. If you go according to future potential, you kill the mother. If you go according to potential right now, then you kill the child, right? But in general, it's not in our capacity to stop it. I mean, if that's the law of the land, if that's the law of the land, even though it goes against Judaism, now it depends. I'll give an example. Remember a few years back when Mr. Obama passed this law in the Supreme Court about same-sex marriages. Right now there was a woman who was a clerk. Right, if you remember the story, she didn't want to push the papers, right, because she doesn't believe in it. They said discrimination. Now the question is, if she were Jewish, does she have to give up her job? Because all she's doing is filling up the paperwork. If she's filling up the paperwork, but it goes against Leviticus chapter 18, technically you shouldn't be allowed to do it, even if you lose your job. Maybe there's a story with a florist refused to, that was also another thing, right? But the question is, how can you give credence or credibility to something that is a abomination, right? You're going to say live and let live. You're not giving credence to it. You're just filling the paperwork, right? So let someone else fill the paperwork, right? But if that's their job and they say, okay, I don't believe in this, I'm not doing it, would they have to find another job? Could be. Yeah, question.
Well, Rabbi, I think in one of our earlier Mishnahs, and maybe you can just reiterate it and clarify it, there was one earlier Mishnah where you talked about not befriending the politician or getting too close.
Right.
Can you clarify how that, because this, it's hard to stay clean if you wade into muck and mire, right?
Yeah, the problem is you hang out with evil people, you become evil yourself, right? That's one of the claims why here in Israel, some people will say it's better for Orthodox Jews not to be in the government, right? Why? Because you're hanging around people that want to bury you and want to bury Judaism. But other people will say if we're not part of that, things will be 10 times worse, right? Now, the other issue is what about in the States? So you have, a lot of Orthodox politicians, obviously trying to do good for the Jewish people, in a non-Jewish land. It's catch-22, big catch-22. And the reason is because, well, they have their own constituents to worry about, right? So they're going to look kind of biased, in what they do. Politics in general is something we should never be a part of, right? In other words, if people will say it's important to vote because you have a say, right? And we have a lot of clout today because of that, with the Orthodox community, certainly in the States, nothing to talk about. So there is what to be said for that, right? I'm not saying not. There's a lot of advocacy. They fought against discrimination, in zoning and other things. I'm not saying it's not an important issue, and that people shouldn't be fighting for certain things. One thing you have to keep in mind is that when you're that close, so to speak, and you're dealing with even secular Jews, or you're dealing with non-Jews, these people probably are not the most squeaky clean people. Right? They're, politicians, everyone knows they're dirty, right? In many ways. I'm not saying everybody. There's a tremendous amount of corruption across the board. Nobody trusts politicians. Yeah. Right? They flip-flop, they change, different things. One thing a person has to remember is, again, they're a Jew or non-Jew in God's world. If they're a Jew or non-Jew in God's world, is this going to benefit me or not benefit me? So sometimes you'll say, sometimes I have to go in the muck and I have to go in the dirt for the greater good. Right now, in Jewish outreach, what some people will do is, in order to draw Jews closer to Judaism, what they'll do is they'll do the same things as these secular Jews in order to show that they're hip, they're with it, they're just like them, even though they dress a little bit different, they keep other things, and at the end of the day, it'll be easy to draw closer to them. Because if I show up with my black hat, my black suit, and my long coat and all that, it's intimidating, right? But if I go to them with a ball game, if I go watch the Super Bowl with them or whatever, whatever the case is, oh, look, he's so hip, he's this, it's more likely that they're going to listen, right? And obviously, the other approach is the Torah sells itself. If the Torah sells itself, it means I can learn anything with anybody. The Torah will have an effect on that person, and I don't have to go into the dirt, right? I don't have to be part of the mud or the dirt in order to draw someone closer. The Torah will do itself. But you'll say, can I have a greater influence, a greater say, being part of some councils or other things, and we can have a say? It's dangerous, right? It's dangerous for the soul. Other people, again, advocates will say we have a golden opportunity to be able to show the world what we need, what our goals are, whatever, and we can fight things in the front line. We're not just by being on the side doing nothing. Obviously there are two opinions. And that opinion, I will tell you, is probably very strong. Because they'll say, well, if we don't do anything, like they'll say here in Israel, if you don't vote, the other side gets more votes, we're not going to have a say in anything. It's going to be 10 times worse. Right? But my Rabbi says something else, and not everyone agrees with him, which is okay. And he'll say that, there's a tremendous amount of Sabbath desecration here. And when the Sabbath desecration in the Jewish state, and you sin, and you do things wrong in the Jewish state in God's backyard, then the punishment is much more severe. If you do it anywhere else, the punishment's also severe. Not as severe as being in God's backyard. So what does he say? So he says, imagine, you have these people in power. You have religious people in power, and they're part of the government, and they know that there's being work done that's not crucial to be done on the Sabbath. And if it's not crucial to be done, they'll say, no, it's pikuach nefesh. It's like saving a life. You have to do it. Otherwise, it won't get done, which is a lie, right? Which is an absolute lie. But even so, what does my Rabbi say? He would say, you're in the government. If you're in the government, this is going on underneath your nose, and you know about it, then you're just as liable as them. Right. Their argument will be, I didn't tell them to do that. Right, I'm trying to fight it. Doesn't matter. You're still there. You're still part of it. It's like you're giving your stamp of approval. Now, other people will say not that way.
Complicit.
Yeah, other people will say, listen, we got to do what we need to do. Otherwise it'll be 10 times worse. And that's the majority opinion, right? That is the majority opinion. I'm not saying not, right? But at the end of the day, it comes at a price, and if you're there just trying to get money, trying to get things for your constituents, whatever, you look bad. You just look bad because, okay, you're looking out for your own interest. You have to, because they'll bury you. They will, if it was up to them, as one left-wing politician said many years ago, when we're finished with the Arabs, we're gonna start with the ultra-Orthodox Jews. Now, this person's a big-time leftist, said it publicly. Yeah, no embarrassment whatsoever to say it. So we know what the agenda is. You're going to say, oh, the majority of people not like that. Doesn't matter. The left in this country would be very happy if there were no Orthodox Jews, and if Jerusalem became like Tel Aviv. There wouldn't be any difference. They wouldn't care. Right? But not getting into politics. I don't get into politics so much. But at the end of the day, when you hang out with these people on a regular basis, your guard is down. And they can have a much greater influence on you than you necessarily having an influence on them. So when you go in the dirt, for you to come out the same as you went in is not going to happen. That's the example. I heard a great rabbi once say, I'd be willing to send my kids to university, to college, but I've never met anyone who's come out more moral from it, if they've lived on campus. If you don't live on campus, it's one thing, but even not living on campus, plenty of things a person's going to listen to that are absolutely heretical. It's going to make you think, right? Say, wow, is the Torah really true? All of academia, the example is all of academia, we spoke about this before also, holds by evolution. Like, there's nothing to talk about. I took a course in history and development of science, all about evolution. It was a joke class, so I took it, just to get out of a science requirement. But the first day, teacher gets up and he says, you go down to the local zoo, you see a chimpanzee or gorilla, you're looking at your cousin in the mirror. So I was like, I don't know who's in your family, but I don't look like a chimp. But again, you listen to this stuff enough, and all this other heresy gets you to think. You say, well, isn't thinking a good thing? Shouldn't I be as open-minded till my brains fall on the floor? No. And the reason is because these things take you down from your spirituality. They have the potential to drag you down. If they have the potential to drag you down, and my goal is to be the best Jew or non-Jew I can be, why in the world am I studying this? This is going to have a negative effect, right? And everyone's drinking the same Kool-Aid, and they'll tell you that every single person has to go to university. And if you don't go to university, you'll never get a job. And that's a crock, right? Depends what it is. But in most cases, if you took a course, let's say in graphic design, or you took a course in other things, you don't need a degree. Degree is a waste of time, most of it. Most of it you're never going to use, right? So if that's the case, why do they keep saying that? Because they have an agenda, right? They certainly have an agenda, but it's not true, right? It's definitely not true. Will people take somebody who's been in university and someone who hasn't? Depends on the qualifications. Plenty of people who made plenty of money not being in university. There's no guarantee, right? But there's this idea being more well-rounded, right? Learning more different things. Seeing more different things. What do I have to do that for? I always give the example, if I know it's bad to bang my head against the wall till it bleeds, I don't do it. No, you got to really try it. Like someone when I was in camp once, said, you have to experience everything. I said, no, you don't. I mean, I wasn't even religious then. I said, of course you don't. Because if I know something is bad and it's proven it's bad, I don't have to experience it. I know it's bad. What, you're going to be the exception? It's a moot point, just a philosophical, it's kind of a stupid philosophical thing to say, right? But in the end, at the end of the day, either I'm going in the right direction, I'm striving, I'm doing what God wants, or I'm not, right? So anything that's going to take me away from that, I got to be very careful. Now, there are certain things we don't have a choice of, right? We don't have a choice. A person gets a job and he finds a job, somewhere, and it's not amongst the greatest people, but I need the money, right? A person needs the money. It's what you do, right? And, you work around other things. But can they have
sweat of her brow?
Yeah, could it have a negative effect? Could have a negative effect. So you're going to say, come on, we don't live in ghettos anymore. Well, some people do, but, we don't live in ghettos anymore, which to a great extent that is true. And even if it is true, it doesn't mean that, my interactions, I have to be careful, and people have, this is a major, major issue, because people will say, come on, like you're square, what? Someone's going to say something, all of a sudden you're not going to be religious anymore. So I'll give an example. There's a famous story with the Baal Tanya. I think I've told the story also. He had a student that wanted to go to university. Right, so the Baal Tanya told him, right, the first Lubavitcher Rabbi told him, he said, listen, be careful. If you go to university, it could have a negative effect, tremendously negative effect on you. It can make you into a heretic. So he says, what are you worried about? He said, I sat and learned by you for many years. I didn't come so righteous. If I don't become so righteous, what are you worried about? I'll go there. They're not going to affect me. Right, I'm like Teflon. They won't affect me at all. So the Baal Tanya said, you're making a very big mistake. He said, in order to absorb holiness, you got to work very hard to attain it. If you want impurity, how does somebody become impure? All they have to do is touch it. It doesn't have to do with philosophy. It doesn't have to do with anything else. The fact that you touch it, 100% according to the Torah, if the temple would exist, if you touch the dead animal, that would make you impure. But you want holiness? Holiness you got to work at. Holiness is something that's not given to you on a platter, right? I told my Rabbi once many years ago, I said, wow. I said, I think you made me, really way too strong. He said, yeah. He said, I wish I did. It's like, I wish I did. Right. But, that's it. If you don't strive, you don't work, you're not going to get it. You're going to have ups and downs. There's no question. Right. You'll have stronger times, weaker times. The evil inclination will get you, whatever. But you got to keep striving. That's the whole point of learning. That's the whole point of having fixed times, living inspired. That's the Energizer Bunny. That's what you got to do even when it's hard. It doesn't matter, but if you let your guard down and you let garbage into your house, that's what happens, right? You let your guard down for a second, especially with the internet, it's over. Because then something pops up, you look at this. Something pops up, you look at that. People get into all kinds of things just by accident, right? I won't say by accident. Nothing's by accident, right? But, but in general. So you say, is it really true? I have to be that insular? Are we that weak, so to speak? Like someone gave the example, or they didn't give the example, is what they told me. They said, listen, if you go to the beach, Beaches are open now. It might be shut down. We'll see how many more cases of corona come
I'm
up.
a couple blocks from a beach here.
And overcrowding, whatever. So this person made a statement and said, I don't understand. They said, if you go to the beach, and you get excited because you're a guy, then there's something wrong with you. So I said, if you go there and you don't, and you suppress the greatest urge that a person has, then you need psychological help. Now, doesn't mean a person should act on it or whatever, but if God gave you the most natural urge, He didn't tell you to suppress it, like with all the problems in the church. He didn't tell you to suppress it. He told you have to know how to use it, right? And how to control it, right? So we have to do that with our thoughts, and that's very hard to do, right? I'll give an example while I'm on this topic. Someone asked me last week this question: how do I control my thoughts during prayer? It's a very hard thing. Our minds, wander and all that. So according to Kabbalah, I don't know if the trolls hold of Kabbalah or not, but according to Jewish mysticism, the way it goes is that if someone is praying, in the middle of prayer, they have extraneous thoughts. Why in the world do they have extraneous thoughts when they're coming face to face with God? One very simple reason, right? Says Jewish mysticism, because you've sinned. You've opened yourself up to sin. Thoughts come in all over the place. If you work on striving to be close to God, right? And this takes time, right? Prayer is a very hard thing to get into, especially if you don't understand the language, right? You don't understand the lingo. You don't understand what's going on. And even if you do, right? One of the worst things you can do is do things by rote, right? 100%. So a person has to work at 100% controlling their thoughts. That means that you don't rush into prayer. That means if you're praying with 10 men or whatever, you get there before it starts. You get all your extraneous thoughts out of your head. You try and focus on what you're doing, because I'm standing in front of the King of Kings. Doesn't matter what you just went through. Doesn't matter if stock market crashed. Doesn't matter if something else happened, right? You still have an obligation to pray. And if you have an obligation to pray, what am I doing thinking about the stock market? What am I doing thinking about, other things I have to worry about or whatever? My focus is on drawing close to God. So when you're saying that prayer about livelihood, you can have that in mind, right? You can have certain things in mind, 100%. But if your mind is going haywire in other things, we're going to see after 120 years, imagine a person prayed 3 times a day, for most of their life. God's going to say, where were you? I'm only giving you credit for 20%. 20%? And I rushed to Minyan. I rushed to pray. What do you mean 20%? Okay, you're right. 7%. 7%? Like, what are you kidding? What are you kidding? What's 70%? 7%? God says, I'm going to drop it. He goes, okay, show me the video. Let's see the video. What does God show you? He shows you all the times you prayed, right? He makes these clips. People take things out of context, right? They make these clips and whatever, right? So God's going to say, okay, I can do that also. Watch this. This is what you prayed. Look what you were thinking about. Look over here. Look what you were thinking about. You're going to say, come on, I'm human. Like, what do you want from me? He says, because you opened yourself to sin. You didn't serve me properly. You didn't do what you were supposed to do. This is what happens. And you have to work on controlling your thoughts. And someone's going to say, well, you gave mankind the greatest urge. What'd you want from me? He said, I wanted you to control it. Right? I mentioned this by Mike Tyson. You remember Mike Tyson, Alan Dershowitz put him on the stand. I don't know why, but he got convicted by being put on the stand, right? For rape. What did he say? What was the great wisdom that he said? He said, this woman was in my room at 3 o'clock in the morning, and everybody knows I'm an animal. So, who cares if everybody knows it gives you a right to rape her? And that was it. He got convicted. That was it. And he went to jail. Finished. Right? So what?
And his career never came back.
Right? So therefore what? So you got the greatest urge in the world. That's not what she wanted. You're guilty. God wanted you to control it. He didn't want you to do that. So what if you think you think yourself as an animal and people know it? That doesn't give you the right to act on it. Doesn't matter if you have that disposition. Right? Spoke about that also. Even if, what's going on with Black Lives Matters. Right? Spoke about this last week. Doesn't matter what their disposition is. I don't care how they grew up, and who their fathers were, and they were drugs and this and that. I have sympathy. I have empathy. Does that give them the right to destroy? Who gives them the right to destroy? Doesn't mean they can't be angry. I'm not saying that. They can have every single right in the world to be angry. They are not allowed to destroy property. Yeah.
Rabbi, I just have to ask because I've always held, especially in these last 15, 20, 30, 25 years, I mean, that Hashem is so just and merciful that there's a real accountability by awareness,
Mm-hmm.
and that Hashem brings things to light before holding you accountable. I know that there are moral imperatives, but I mean, I have met some people that just don't have the aptitude or the intellect to actually digest and decipher. But Hashem is capable of meeting their lives right where they're at,
I,
and their
I don't
sphere of
understand.
influence.
Don't steal and don't loot. That you can have a 55 IQ unless you're an imbecile. Aren't they taught you're not allowed to steal? You're not allowed to
Yeah.
damage property. There's
So
no
the sevens
excuse.
still apply cleanly.
Yeah,
I
that's
get
for
that.
sure. Listen, there's a famous medrash. Okay, sorry, it's oral law. I know we're winding down here. It's a good story though. There's a fisherman gets up to heaven, and God said one of the things He's going to ask you is, were you honest in business, and did you study Torah? So he asked, did you study Torah? He says, you didn't give me the brain capacity. God says, really? He said, what'd you do for a living? He said, I was a fisherman. He said, okay, explain to me. How did you trap fish? How did you get fish? So he told him about the intricate nets that they made and how they went about it and what they did. He wasn't such a dummy when it came to trapping fish. And it was very successful what he did. However successful he was. Right? So God says, isn't it true? Isn't it true the same God who gave you the brains to figure out how to trap fish, didn't He give you the same brains in order to sit and learn Torah? Now again, everybody at their level, right? He might have had a 75 IQ or 100 IQ, might not be the brightest person. Does that mean he can't learn? Does that mean he can't listen to classes? Right? Again, unless he's mentally challenged, then he's totally exempt. Right? If he's got limited knowledge, fine. God will judge him that way. Right? But a person can't say, well, what do you want from me? This is the way you made me. But you didn't work. You didn't strive. You wasted your time. You're playing video games. You're playing Candy Crush. Playing these other things. You're wasting your life. You wasted your life. I didn't tell you to do that.
It's too short and precious.
Yeah. That's it. And we're going to be very surprised. Yeah, God has mercy. But you cannot transgress Coffman's 615th commandment of don't be a moron. You cannot make that excuse. And, if God didn't give you the capability to learn anything, you're an imbecile. God forbid you're mentally challenged. Okay, you're exempt. Doesn't mean, you can't keep mitzvahs. It's going to be in a totally different level. But if you have the opportunity to do so, you say, well, my knowledge was limited. God's going to say, let me show you the source of your soul. Let me show you what you could have done. Let me show what your ability really was, but you just didn't use it. And that is going to be scary because you can't run away from that. That's ultimate judgment. That's what hell in a certain way is because of potential. And if that's the case, imagine you're going to sit there sheepishly, I don't know how this works, embarrassed as a pure soul, turning red, white, and whatever color, seeing what your potential was and seeing what you did. Right? Because isn't every person who has an out-of-body experience, what's the first thing they see? Their soul hovers above the body. Everyone says the same thing, and their life flashes before their eyes. Every single thing that they did, so they can't deny it. There is no denying, right? 100%. There's no denying. So then you have to justify or not justify what you did, and then you get to see what you could have done and what you were supposed to do. That can be terrifying as enough. That's a scary proposition, but again, God's going to come to all these people. They're all liable for a death penalty, and He says, "What are you doing? Who gave you the right to do this? Don't you understand? Didn't you see how we grew up, how discrimination, and how all these things are?" God says, "Yeah, okay. So, but two wrongs don't make a right. It doesn't matter what happened to you and what your DNA is. These are basic things." Right? Basic things mean you cannot destroy police vehicles. That's against the law.
You can't take over a city or dethrone
Right.
them. And
you can't throw fire bombs and take out Nikes
anarchy.
and all these things. Even if you're not going to sell them, it doesn't matter. That's it. That's going to be. You didn't know that was forbidden. God's not going to care how you grew up because I understand how you grew up. You don't think I run the world? You don't think I know these things?
Of course, Hashem knows it all. Well, Rabbi, I mean, we're at our 90-minute mark. I mean,
Yeah.
can you sum it up with a positive note? Because I know you're doing such a wonderful job. You're really correcting us in many ways, and you're bringing Torah, and it's
You're all
it's
going
just
to
like
die.
medicine.
There is no positive. No, I'm kidding.
I think the only thing sparing me right now is there's no CFL. I mean,
Yeah, right. That is the only thing probably sparing you right now. That's true. That's a good point. But yeah, in 30 seconds, a person has to realize what our obligation is in the world, right? Even with all the doom and gloom and everything else, either you want to do the right thing or you're not going to do the right thing. And this is a very nasty world, right? You have to put all your effort. And I always say King David says in Psalms that I should stay away from evil. Psalm 34. I should stay away from evil and do good. So this is the generation of Teflon, as I would call it. So staying away from evil, I would tell you, as King David says, if you stay away from evil in this world, you will definitely have a portion of the world to come. Doing good, that's extra, right? That's the lowest level. We're not interested in just doing good. We want to go beyond, right? We want to decipher in our lives what's going to be good for my soul, what's not going to be good. And what's not good, you stay away from the plague. You go to the opposite end of the world. Now, it's not easy. It's definitely not easy, but I can tell you, anything you learn, if you learn anything from me, one thing is I started like everybody else. I just had a knowledge of Hebrew, but I didn't know anything else. I didn't know the stories of the Bible, stories of the Mishnah, anything, right? So when I started to learn as a hotshot from a, Ivy League university, so I had to translate like everyone else. I had no idea what was going on. I had to start from humble beginnings, but in the end, everything you learn is a building block, right? No one's going to say you're going to change overnight. You're going to stop doing this overnight. No one's making that claim. You have to be open enough.
Are we better today than we were
right,
yesterday?
Exactly. So I have to see that where I'm holding now is not the same as I was holding yesterday. If I'm holding the same, someone says I'm happy being mediocre, then that's bad, right? That is akin to spiritual death. If a person says I'm growing, it doesn't matter how hard it gets, but I want to get to a certain point. I want to work on certain things. That's what you have to do, but you take it step by step. And I promise you, that a person takes it step by step, you will get somewhere. And you will have building blocks, and you're not going to be the same. You're certainly not going to be the same, as you were yesterday or the day before, because now your mind's expanding. Right now you're learning different things. Now the only question is, how am I going to implement it? How am I going to do it? And how I'm going to grow. It doesn't matter if I fall. What does the Torah tell me? Right? The prophets tell me a righteous person gets knocked down 7 times and he gets up. So we get knocked down in life all the time, all kinds of difficulties. And God says, brush yourself off and, start again. That's what you have to do, regardless of how hard it is. You will get somewhere because you have that mentality. Now, that mentality is not easy to get, but that has to be the mantra.
Excellent. So you heard it, folks. You gotta brush yourselves off, especially if you've been knocked down or you've fallen down or you've slipped up. Make the world a better place by working on yourselves and everywhere in the environment. Don't be a part of any anarchist type behavior. Stay far away. And I love how Rabbi talked about King David here in the end and just, working on good things. So, folks, I got to wind it down. Rabbi, are we good for next Saturday, tentatively, Hashem willing?
We should be good. I don't see any reason. This is the latest that Shabbos should be going out, so it should be getting next week should be also same time. Should be getting earlier.
And then the sun starts to go in the different direction. So
yeah, 100%. So then then we go back to 9:00 soon enough, but or 2:00.
If you want to go for 2 hours, we'll have to wait till after that.
Yeah, 2 hours. Right. When do you stop? That's it. Like, come on. Is it over yet? I gave classes on Sunday for like 5 hours, and people had a lot of questions in my last class. Like, the last question is, am I dead yet? No, I'm still going. So yeah, next week should be good.
Well, there he is, the Energizer Bunny of Torah, folks. He keeps going and going and going, and we just appreciate you more and more and more, Rabbi. We thank you for the Torah you're sharing. So until next week, folks, have a good one, okay?